when there's only one thing I can do. Well, you know that I still don't wanna do it. And love, I can find it again in someone sitting close in the flashes of sin. There are other ways I used to think to find my way around the wood and the smell and the word of farewell that I always had to sound. Oh.
I'm Marianne Zickuhr. I'm the founding executive director of Preservation Louisville. When my family moved to Louisville, I grew up in the Portland neighborhood. I've lived in Butchertown and Old Louisville, and it is my goal to live in all 7 preservation districts. I am also the host of a radio show called Florida Arts on Art FM.
Hi, I'm Jaison Gardner. I live near Churchill Downs. I am just a community activist, and I co-host a radio show called Strange Fruit on WFPL.
Jennifer Chappell. I live in the Snitzelberg neighborhood, and I serve on the Snitzelberg Area Community Council, and I created 3 Points, a public space in Germantown and Shelby Park, trying to get a lot of public art going in Louisville.
My name's Patrick Henry. I'm a landscape architect. I live in the Germantown neighborhood. I own a business called Patrick Henry Landscape Architects, formerly Henry McGalliard. I designed this space and constructed the space, and my office also designed the original ReSurfaced. So the original one was all volunteer based, all the work, with the exception of my office we had equipment in here, we had guys in here with just a little bit of know-how, and then we had a lot of volunteers. There were some days that it was hard to keep everyone busy because there were so many people here. This one, a little more, was sponsored. So it was a little more, let's put this thing together as quickly as possible. We didn't have time to organize the volunteers. But that'll come for the next resurface.
Thank goodness.
Future resurface.
Yes. Yeah.
Last year when we were doing the 3 Points project, which I had 2 artists painting a mural at 3 Points, which represents Shelby Park, Snitzelberg, and German Paristown. One of the artists was from New York City. He went to school there. He's actually from Louisville. And then we actually had a couple of friends come in from out of town that just kind of helped out during the process of painting it. One was from LA, another one was from Missouri. And so after a week of painting on Friday night, I brought them all to ReSurfaced, and they loved it. I think for them it was really eye-opening since they were all originally from Louisville but then had dispersed across the country. I think it was good for them to see, wow, Louisville's really stepping up its game. It's really becoming an urban city that we could be proud of. Because it was great to come down here and see the Kentucky Center had something going on, the Yum Center had something going on, there's something at Actors Theater, so there was just so many people walking around and going to restaurants. So it wasn't just resurfaced. I mean, it was one of those times when I said, oh, I'm really glad that I can't find a parking spot because that means so many people are down here. But just hearing the comments from people saying, wow, this makes me want to move back to Louisville. That made me really, really proud to hear that, because I think ReSurfaced is really important to not only attract new people and retain people, but also regain people that have left Louisville, kind of waiting for it to grow up. Like everyone always says, I'll come back to Louisville one day, but I'm glad that they can come back to a Louisville that they're really proud of. And like tonight I'm bringing a friend from Chicago, and I'm really excited to show her ReSurfaced. I was like, I don't care what we do tonight, we're going to ReSurfaced. So I think it's something that we can really, really be proud of.
You're absolutely correct. This is representative of lots of things that are booming on Main Street in general, and It really kind of chokes me up because I think back, it was 8 years ago when I started my nonprofit, Preservation Louisville, and the very first thing that was really kind of a massive advocacy effort was Whiskey Row. And to think that someone was going to take out a chunk of our most historic block in the city, and now there are people writing about it internationally, about how hip it is. It's the cool place to be. And ReSurfaced is a big part of that. And it really does show that you can have a space, and even though it's vacant at the time, it can still have a life. It's still part of the life history of this particular parcel. But I think it just really does bring, I think, a highlight to the fact that we have historic spaces, we have a need for infill, and there is a conversation between those two things. Preserving our historic buildings and then also repurposing the spaces that are here, just like this one.
I think it'll also bring attention to the area because it's a little bit more west. And so our downtown west waterfront is atrocious. We have a walking path, but I go down there every day and there's not much. There's a lot of surface parking lots and highways, and it's sad to see that our waterfront is developed like that, but hopefully this could be something in reclaiming public spaces and making them more suitable for public use.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned how far west this is. Because I enter into these spaces with a little bit of mixed emotions. I'm a big advocate of our city. I love the downtown area. I love what's happening in terms of this rebirth, but I'm also always cognizant of who's absent from this equation. And the notion of reclaiming spaces and repurposing spaces has always been something that oppressed people have done. And so I just think about how beautiful this project could be if something similar happened to an old house in the West End or in Portland, and that there are beautiful spaces that are frankly sitting vacant that no one wants to buy or refurbish, but with a little bit of private-public partnership, those spaces can become a brand new event space in the West End, or they can become a public park. And so I love what's happening, but for me it always seems as if these types of events happen only when, quite frankly, white folks discover it and it becomes cool. So what was New Lou 15 years ago? What was Portland 5 years ago? And now that Portland is becoming cool, there's a lot of investment in it, but what happens to the people who have lived there for 3 or 4 generations? And where do they go, literally, but then also where do they fit figuratively in terms of how are people, urban people who occupy these spaces for many generations, how they involved in this project. So I'm really curious in terms of how many people of color access this particular space. There's some wonderful charity events that happen here. There's some wonderful city-sponsored events that happen here, but how many people from the West End know that this space exists or that they have access to this space? And so I'm just always cognizant of in what ways we exclude other people because they aren't as cool or as trendy as what we're trying to create. So I would love to see something like this inspire people to do similar projects in the West End, in the South End, and other parts of town that have traditionally been neglected, like this space was once upon a time.
And that's great what Patrick was saying about the fact that this will be, the last time that ReSurfaced is here and that it will move, and maybe there are opportunities, to take that west or south.
Well, and I think they did a good job with the programming on the first one of sort of being very inclusive. And sometimes in this kind of situation, it takes putting it smack dab in the middle of where people of power and money are, so that you can sort of start to create a buzz and that kind of thing, raise the awareness. And so ReSurfaced, for me, it was just a great opportunity to sort of step in, take a space that was neglected. Coming into it, you could look around. I mean, I could look around and say, wow, there's a lot of potential in here. But when there's nothing in here, it really does just look like a parking lot.
Space, yeah.
The first one felt like a cool little pocket park. And this one we were, I think, kind of trying to go for something that's kind of like a plaza, beer garden. We were looking at a couple things. We were looking at beer festivals. What do those look like? And then we were looking at just Kentucky and the bourbon industry. What are the colors, the materials? How can we sort of pull some of that aesthetic into it?
But I know talking with other community leaders, they've been like, oh, how do I get ReSurfaced in my neighborhood? How do I?
Sure.
So it's great to see people wanting that, but also giving them the power or the knowledge, the information on how they can do that in their own communities. Because I know just doing a mural, I have no background on doing murals or anything, but I set up a website where it's very transparent. Here's my proposal, here's my grant application, here's my finances, just so I can say, this is my first time doing it, but hopefully you can learn from what I've done, and then you can learn how to implement it in your own way. So whether or not it's, I know that somebody at, I always call it
Pachachka.
Pachachka. They were talking about setting up a Haymarket in the West End, you know, reviving that was once there. So I think that just empowering the people to say, hey, you can do this too is really important.
Neighborhoods and how we think about them, walkability, transportation, it's always a conversation, and especially in the urban core, I think it's something that Louisville has always kind of grappled with because, you know, we're like the biggest like little town.
Small city,
yeah, right.
Smallest big city.
So it's interesting that we go to other places like Chicago and they've got trains or light rails and people can easily get back and forth from different parts of the city. And yes, we do have a busing system, but it may not always run to these, you know, places and then back to where those folks need to get home to.
Sprawl is a bit of the enemy of mass transit and of good transit. Density is what will make for a better transit system. And so long as we're not encouraging density in the city, so long as businesses are mandated to have X number of parking spaces per, you know, however many seat in their restaurant or whatever, we'll just encourage cars.
I actually work 2 doors down, so I walked here. I walked a whole 100 feet here, I believe. But the front of my building is actually the visitor center, so it actually gives me a good perspective on, and that's manned by volunteers, so they come in there, and it's just interesting to see the type of people that walk in there, and also how many people walk in there during the day. And it's just great to see people, and I've definitely noticed it picking up over the years, walking around, and they always walk past ReSurfaced and look, oh, what is that? They're so intrigued.
One of my favorite things about downtown Louisville, including New Lou and the downtown area, and even as we go further west towards the Slugger Museum, is how easily it is to navigate. And every time I get a chance, I like to catch the bus or walk to this part of town and just kind of explore new streets. And I think that if more people would park their cars and take a weekend and hop on the number 4 bus and come into the city, or hop on whatever bus route is nearest them and come into the city. And it's a wonderful chance to explore those new boutiques, those new vendors, but also if the bus only runs to 8th Street, get off and walk 4 more blocks and see what's over there, see what undiscovered treasures lie just west of 9th Street. And I think that's part of it too, is us being willing to go a little bit beyond where the bus runs, to go a little bit beyond the confines of the highway and what we know as our neighborhoods. I think that if we did that, it would help to bridge a lot of gaps in our community, to help for us to discover new spaces, but also discover new people. But I do love how easy it is, for the most part, to navigate downtown Louisville. Certainly TARC has a wonderful program. They have some areas they can do better, and better ways they can serve their clientele, most of whom are low income and really need the system. But for the most part, I think downtown Louisville, this area in particular, are really accessible, especially on foot and on bike. And the mayor's new 100-mile loop that's going to allow people to literally go around the entire city. And I think that'll be a really, really cool thing.